So it all started with an unlucky guy who wakes up inside a wooden box. There he began banging on the walls non-stop for an entire year, but nothing happened, until he discovered that he was actually inside a dungeon. In it, he has to explore multiple floors and defeat powerful monsters. All of this while live streaming for the gods of the ancient world. The protagonist wonders where he is and whether he has lost his life. What he is touching seems to be wood. He wonders if it is a coffin, if someone placed him there thinking he was lifeless. But if he is in a coffin, he should be lying down, yet he is standing and he doesn't know what is happening or whether he remembers anything. First, he needs to get out of there, and since it is wood, he should be able to break it. He strikes the wood and something begins to wrap around his fist. The wood fragments into pieces as he keeps hitting it. The protagonist wonders why water keeps leaking out through the cracks, but then notices it is not water. A system screen appears, saying it is mysterious honey that provides life force and healing. The young man is startled by the notification. He realizes his wound is being healed. No matter how injured he becomes, he will be cured if he applies the honey to his wounds. Even hunger can be resolved with it. He wonders how much time has passed while he kept striking his way out. He has completely lost track of time of how long he has been pounding against the wall. After one final blow, the wall collapses and the protagonist says it finally happened. But he wants to know where on earth he is. It seems to be a tube with honey flowing through it, blocked by a rock at one end. The walls are metal, and he wonders how long he was inside the coffin. The system congratulates user 5248 for escaping the tutorial dungeon. He has entered the first floor, and a total of many people can proceed to the second floor. The protagonist wonders what that means and whether there is more to it. A system window asks him to choose a nickname to be used during live broadcasts. Go In-sung wonders if he has been trapped inside some kind of strange game. He kneels down begging to be saved. The system notifies him that his nickname is Please Save Me, and that he can check his channel, but he cannot change it until he completes Area 1. A viewer named Reflection calls him an idiot and says that nickname is terrible. In-sung asks if they are watching him, and Reflection replies that he is in the middle of a live broadcast right now. He can check the channel details by pressing Settings. The screen shows his information, Korean nationality, and a total of 306 days streamed. In-sung wonders about this and wants to know who these fans are. He asks if he was dead, but the system responds yes and no at the same time. The protagonist asks to be sent back home and demands to know who they are. A man replies that he is very busy. In-sung begs him to explain what is going on. Reflection says he is not his teacher or anything like that and will not explain everything. If In-sung does the same thing in his broadcasts, he will be finished. In-sung wonders what he should do and whether he should press something. The dungeon shop screen appears, showing everything he can buy with balloons. In-sung thinks that if he was dead, this might be his chance to return to the world of the living. The system shows that a new person has joined his stream, and he realizes this must be like television. So he needs to entertain in order to earn balloons. He introduces himself as Go In-sung to his masters. The viewers comment that he is an idiot and should call himself Please Save Me. In-sung deduces that he was the 100th out of 101 people to complete the tutorial, and the next dungeon is limited to only 90 people. The viewers ask if he just noticed that and remark that it is not impressive to have taken 306 days to finish the tutorial. In-sung asks if they can tell him how to get out of there, but the viewers tell him to just do the same as in the tutorial. The protagonist says he simply punched his way through, but the viewers don't believe him. In-sung shows them the box. His fans mock how stupid he is, since all he needed to do was open the wooden box above him. He really did smash the wall and use honey whenever he was injured. One fan decides to reward his dedication, giving him 7 balloons. In-sung thanks them, thinking these are his first balloons. Then he says he will work hard and become number 1, while the viewer laughs at how seriously he says it. They tell him he should really work hard because the dungeon is no joke. A metal grate falls to the ground and In-sung cuts it open with a knife. The young man descends the stairs and the system notifies that the streamer Instant Beauty was the first to enter the dungeon. He receives a random rank F skill as a reward. The protagonist continues cutting and Reflection asks how many days he has been doing this. In-sung replies that it has been a week and Reflection is the only one who has kept watching until now. The young man complains that the rock hasn't moved at all. His head doesn't even fit in the honey pipe either, so Reflection tells him to do something that actually makes sense. In-sung wonders why there is a ladder and a saw in his inventory and his only viewer gives up. The protagonist manages to cut another piece but collapses onto the floor. He thinks they must have changed the item's name because the second bar lasted 10 days. He is exhausted and cannot cut through 2 more of those when the system warns that another person has entered the dungeon and only 15 slots remain. In-sung gets up, grumbling, and Reflection jokes that King Yahello is waiting for him. The protagonist looks up at the ceiling, almost crying, but then he decides to climb the stairs. His viewer asks what he's doing, since it has been so long and he is still doing the same thing. In-sung notices something different, and grabs the stairs. He shakes them and breaks them loose from side to side. Reflection comments that he has lost his mind, saying people always go insane in situations like these. A new person joins the stream and asks what this guy is doing. In-sung tells him to just watch and see what he's thinking, and the newcomer jokes that maybe he believes an ambulance will come save him. The protagonist shakes the stake, thinking it was just a little more. His viewers warn him that his hair is catching on fire. They call him insane anyway, while In-sung groans in pain and forces himself back up. His viewers donate a total 4 balloons and join his fan club. In-sung runs back and forth, shouting that since things had come to this, he would set fire to the massive stone wall. The stone moves on its own and falls to the ground, leaving his fans astonished. In-sung shouts that he did it, but the viewers are confused. They ask him to explain what happened, and the protagonist says it wasn't a stone at all, but a turtle that had been trapped there. The young man says he had a feeling it wasn't a stone, but some kind of animal. The dungeon had a total of 10 stages, and the clue he guessed was 10 and turtle, meaning 10 years of longevity. When compiling the keywords, that's what came to his mind. Since they said everything had a reason, it wasn't just speculation. The young man admires the new trial room. His system notifies him that this is a dungeon with a hidden treasure. He can leave if he has a treasure in his inventory. The fans shout that it's amazing, and In-sung says he doesn't know what drew him here since there are so many things, but he must be careful because everything has a reason. You will think carefully about it. He adds that maybe he can even find some gold coins. Then he picks up a copper coin, and the system says it can be exchanged for 10 balloons, but suddenly it starts dissolving in his hand. His chat laughs, saying he was fooled by the copper coin. In-sung mutters that this place is full of disappointment and wonders if he should try gold this time. Picking up a silver coin, the system notifies him that it is a tradable item, but it vanishes soon after as well. In-sung thinks this place feels more like a hall. He picks up an iron sword with attack power 5 and swings it around, until he hears a growling stomach on the other side, and the chat teases that it was really loud. In-sung reflects that he can only have one item in his inventory, which means there must be a hidden one. So it must be something around there, he thinks, rummaging through the pile of money. But even after minutes of searching, he finds nothing. His chat asks why his hands move so fast, saying he looks like a thief. A chalice falls to the ground, and In-sung realizes there are only ordinary treasures, nothing hidden. He knows he doesn't have much time left and needs to eat to recover his strength. He picks up some bread, calling it a banquet for himself. The turtle touches In-sung's leg with its paw, and he asks if it wants a piece of bread. Since he only escaped thanks to it, he decides to give it a bite, but then he notices something inside its mouth, and his chat jokes that he's going to lose his hand. In-sung reacts quickly enough to grab it without even hurting himself. The system announces it is a capture orb that allows him to tame an animal with a 100% success rate if he feeds it first. Everyone is shocked, and the chat begs for it not to be real. He can now use the chat window by spending 10 balloons, and Reflection donates 20. The chat wonders if he might be returned. In-sung questions the guaranteed chance of taming a monster, and whether that means monsters will appear in the future. The turtle lets out his sound, and In-sung shouts at it for eating all his bread. But then he thinks if he's right about the theme, it really is a turtle. He gets up and celebrates while the chat asks what he's trying to do. He repeats his theory about longevity and says the true protagonist of the first room is this turtle. Then he uses the capture orb on it. A massive energy fills the entire room, and the chat jokes they're going to call Animal Protection Services. The monster's true form emerges. The system announces that the protagonist has captured a giant turtle spirit, leaving his chat in disbelief. In-sung steps back, thinking this is insane as he faces the creature. The system warns that the spirit will return to its infant form, and the energy quickly recedes. It reveals a small turtle, and the chat says this is probably legendary. The baby turtle spirit gives the protagonist a liquid that heals. In-sung says he knows it's good, but it really is a high-rank item. His chat donates 5 balloons since he's on a winning streak. They keep recommending him, and the protagonist manages to level up in the system. He bows in gratitude. But then his tired eyes open slightly, and he wonders if he is suffering from fatigue. He suddenly collapses onto the dungeon floor, already unconscious. Footsteps are heard approaching. A noise of tiny chicks disturbs the protagonist. He wonders what it is and gets up angrily. Then he realizes he had fallen asleep while working. His job was to check whether those animals were female, something an untrained person could never do. The hens would be sent to grow, while the males were considered useless and discarded. In-sung yawns and wonders why he feels so sleepy today. Suddenly, a purple energy takes over his chair and approaches. The protagonist says that males are living beings too, as he trembles in fear, only to wake up from his nightmare inside the dungeon. In room 2 of the dungeon was a food storage chamber where one must escape with wisdom. In-sung says he was automatically brought to room 2. Then he notices the chicks and says he dreamed of them because of this, but he wonders if they might be food. The honey water was the same, but the surroundings were sealed off, except for a very high vent. He notices a gap in the wall that could be a path, but it is also too high. In-sung sits down, thinking the theme is 10 symbols of longevity, but the chicks don't fit. He suddenly stands up with the idea of punching the wall, and his chat jokes that nothing is more fun and simple than that. In-sung stops after a single punch that breaks off a piece. He says he'll check the shop first. The system is selling a rope, chicken feed, and a growth accelerator. In-sung reflects that he must raise these chickens, but first he'll raise his viewership. Buying for 50 balloons, the system allows 15 more people to join. In-sung reflects that now 20 people can watch, so he shouts that this time will be different and everyone should believe in him. The chickens grow, and after a few hours, he falls asleep on the floor. His chat begins to rebel, saying it's boring. In-sung reflects that his few fans are just a bunch of delinquents. Still, he feeds his chickens, and his chat asks why he does this every day. The protagonist says these birds will lay eggs since they're all females. The system notifies that the streamer's small satisfactions escaped the dungeon first and received a rank S skill chest. In-sung loses his mind over how fast it happened, and his chat mocks that he's going insane again. The next day, the protagonist wakes up to find eggs and realizes he can finally eat. The system says these eggs can increase stamina and dexterity. With a few pounding noises, In-sung is breaking through the wall. His fans wonder when he gains such an advantage and state they'd like some eggs too. In-sung reflects that he can't stay in last place and has no time. He keeps striking with all his strength, trying to break out. His blows shatter parts of the wall, and his chat jokes that they can see a ray of hope. In-sung stops, his hand injured. He wonders why he hadn't thought of this sooner, as the turtle heals him. The young man thanks it, and his chat jokes that it's time for his little young guy to grow up. In-sung announces he's close to breaking through, and his wound is fully healed. But the system reminds him that the streamer Moon Swordsman has entered the next room, leaving only 66 slots remaining. In-sung kneels on the ground, wondering why he's even here when he feels so exhausted. If only he could fly for a few seconds like the chickens, things would be easier. But after saying this, he gets an idea. The protagonist begins hitting the chickens, and his chat jokes that it's animal abuse. In-sung places the eggs around his arms, and then his body starts rolling back and forth across the floor. Suddenly, wings form on his back because of it, and the chat says it makes no sense at all. In-sung smiles, declaring that everyone will see whether it works or not, then leaps forward with all his strength. In real life, everyone always laughed at him, but now, thanks to the eggs, his strength and dexterity were superhuman. He would definitely be able to fly. In-sung uses all his strength, and the chat jokes that he actually did it. The protagonist tries to reach the vent, but immediately crashes to the ground. He looks up, thinking he can't just rely on strength alone, and that he must have stepped in the wrong place. Or maybe it was because those feathers weren't his own. Those creatures gain feathers through their own life force. In-sung repeats that last word, then stands up and says that's it. He approaches the honey, and his chat asks what's wrong with him this time. In-sung applies the honey to his wings, gaining life force from it. He screams that the feathers are digging into his flesh, but tells everyone to watch, because now they really are like his own wings. Finally, he buys a rope from the system. He says that now he can stabilize his wings, and his chat doesn't need to worry about him, since the theme of longevity in this room was rising up. In-sung smiles and presses his feet firmly against the floor. He leaps while shouting that he will become the very active Ascension with all these chickens. He manages to get close to the vent, and his chat refuses to believe what's happening. A strange energy surrounds his body, and he twists in midair while the chat comments it's been a while since anyone used honey. The protagonist escapes the room, and the system offers a special chat for 10 balloons. Reflection donates 50 balloons, saying he will never doubt him again, and the others in chat say it's their first time witnessing such an idiot. The system announces is a path leading to room 4 of the dungeon. In-sung questions it, and the chat explains it's a reward for escaping the hard way. Reflection donates another 50 balloons, saying his eyes are only for him, and the chat jokes that even Yama is watching. The protagonist asked about that, but it's just one of his fans' jokes. A castle appears before him, shrouded in smoke. In a strange corridor, someone says they've just been watching all along without anyone knowing. They admit they haven't seen someone as bizarre as this guy in quite some time. In-sung sits at the edge of the air vent, staring downward. His chat asks why he's wasting time thinking and insists he should move forward. The protagonist decides to climb down from the vent. His chat questions why he's going back to the previous floor. In-sung explains he's going to buy more chicken feed. He says they all deserve to eat as well. The leftovers would return to his inventory. He picks up a chicken, saying he'll bring them along too. His chat jokes that he can't take food out of room 2, and the protagonist suddenly remembers. He leaps upward with a bag clenched in his mouth, returning to the vent in the sky. In-sung says that rule existed, but he's already in room 4. The system announces he was the first to enter and that 69 slots remain. He receives a Ramen rank F skill as a reward. In-sung says he'll deal with the skill later. First, he needs to pluck all these feathers. Groaning in pain, his chat asks why it hurts so much. The rank F skill box appears, and In-sung says he'll open it properly. His chat shouts for him to get an advanced evasion skill, but instead the box gives him an enhanced focus skill, and In-sung says he'll learn it anyway. Energy floods into his body, making his eyes glow. In-sung learns the skill strength and concentration, which increases stamina the longer it is used. The protagonist's mind clears, sharper than usual. He begins walking as dim lights fail to fully illuminate the corridor. In-sung keeps walking, and the system explains that Rune 4 is a passage where prisoners once escaped. He repeats words about determination and wisdom while opening the shop, which sells food, water, and armor. The protagonist wonders if this is a dangerous place, and the very fact that armor is being sold confirms it. He decides to buy leather armor and continue onward. A massive axe swings down, narrowly missing In-sung's head. The protagonist activates the focus enhancement skill. He manages to dodge the strike of the axe. In-sung stares at the weapon as it dissolves into an aura. He wonders what that was and whether this place is a passage filled with traps. A light approaches him, revealed to be an arrow that pierces his shoulder. In-sung comments that they are fire arrows as well, but he pulls it out with ease. His chat makes jokes about the arrowhead, saying he should use it as a bookmark. The protagonist tosses the arrow behind him, thinking that wasn't the solution either. But he apologizes to his fans, saying it will be boring for a while, and the chat wonders what's about to happen. Hours later, hundreds of eggs are broken, and the spectators comment that he is insane. In-sung runs back and forth, powered by the boost in vigor. Panting heavily when he finally stops, he thanks everyone for waiting for him. Then he reflects that he ate 20 muscle system eggs and focused his strength as well. Now he can actually do it. He crouches down, then takes off running, and his fans ask why he keeps carrying the chickens. The focus enhancement skill, now at level 2, activates. In-sung dodges, saying he already knew it was a trap. He keeps sprinting while releasing the chickens. His chat comments that he was using them as shields against projectiles, and In-sung apologizes for that. The protagonist sees something coming from the end of the path, but he grabs the spear with his bare hands, straining with effort. The strike nearly pierces his eye, and his chat is amazed at his strength. Other lights brighten the place as more arrows fly in, blocked by the spear. But one arrow manages to pierce his back. In-sung endures, saying he just needs a break. If he keeps running, he'll survive. Then he accelerates again, pushing his speed to the limit to make it through. Until this time, he notices blades rushing toward him. The young man pulls his spear back and tries to parry the blade, surprising his chat. They scream for someone to save their streamer. In-sung uses the spear as support, propelling himself through the air. He lands in a barren land, and the system notifies that he has reached a safe zone. He sighs in relief, saying he finally made it before collapsing. He wonders if this exhaustion is a side effect of the focus enhancement, and his body feels heavy with fatigue. In front of him is sand, the first time he has seen it since arriving in this place. Sometime later, he wakes up, saying he must have slept, but his chat tells him it's been an entire week. The young man is stunned, now standing before a massive door. He comments that it's huge, even bigger than the one in room 2. Since it's a door, he only needs to open it. But then he notices a keyhole, realizing that the first arrow that struck him was actually a key. Still, he warns he won't go back, and his chat asks if he's giving up. In-sung reflects that if he looks back at everything that's happened, there's only one way to escape, and there's no guarantee he'll find that arrow again. In that case, he approaches the barrier and picks up a few arrows within reach. He comments that it seems the first arrow at the entrance was unique. The system announces that Instant Beauty has entered Dungeon 4, and In-sung reflects on how they're always in first place. However, it is then announced that a condition has been met and a new item has been added to the TV shop. It's a chat channel between streamers, and In-sung makes his decision. He sees a keyboard and a chat window appear. A girl in high heels arrives on the floor and wonders what kind of nonsense this is. She looks to the side, seeing a message from another streamer. Then she's surprised by what has just happened. In-sung receives a reply from the girl, who asks if he was the guy in the top 3. Instant Beauty comments that he had an interesting name, while mentally calling him an idiot. Suddenly, a light approaches her and grazes her stomach. The arrow falls to the ground, and she questions where it came from. It was seriously dangerous, while her chat calls it a cursed arrow. Instant Beauty throws it away, shouting that she's hurt, and the chat is surprised at her sudden change in attitude. The girl wonders what was wrong, insisting she had done nothing bad, while thinking her true self had almost been revealed. A message from In-sung arrives, saying she must be busy. Instant Beauty answers that she was hit by an arrow. The protagonist comments that she must have entered the passage, and the girl complains that he should have told her about it. He asks what the arrowhead looked like, and Instant Beauty says she'll tell him hers if he tells her his. In-sung is surprised, thinking he doesn't care. She doesn't say, and the girl responds that she already threw it away. He bursts into laughter, and his chat comments that his name is Go In-sung because he was close to losing his life. In-sung offers a trade, and the girl thinks she has the most balloons, but he was there only for an exchange, asking what kind, while the protagonist says it'll be an exchange of information. She smiles and asks if he was feeling insecure. In-sung curses this damned woman, and his chat jokes that he's being judged by a woman. The protagonist tells her that she won't escape without the arrow she threw away. Instant Beauty asks what he means and where it's used, while In-sung says he doesn't know. She decides to search everywhere since it's something necessary to get out of there. Tripping on the floor, she nearly falls from the bridge but manages to cling on and climb back up, thinking she had been wrong. In this place, the one one who explored more gained more power. She would go to hell with her pride. Then she says she was only joking and asks if the arrow might appear again somewhere. In-sung asks how she got past the 3rd floor before revealing his answer, and she says she used rope and other things to climb. The protagonist thinks she scaled a wall, and the other method could have been stairs. A wall or stairs, an obstacle that must be overcome. It was definitely the mountain theme from the 10 symbols of longevity. Instant Beauty asks where the arrow is, and the protagonist smiles. He explains it was the key to escape from the 4th floor, leaving her shocked. The girl asks if it reappears, but In-sung shatters her hopes. She needles and asks if he doesn't need to look for it too. In-sung says he still has the arrow and never threw it away. The girl sighs in frustration, and the chat channel is closed by the protagonist. He writes in the sand about turtles, cranes, and mountains, with the 10 remaining symbols being the sun, water, peaches, clouds, and deer. What he has before him is a metal door and a great wall, where the remaining symbol on this path is nothing, since he can't think of it, and he rolls on the ground angrily. Elsewhere, Instant Beauty complains that she fell for his trick and didn't get any useful information even after revealing details about the arrow. But in this dungeon, there was more than one way to escape. She stands thinking she still has a chance. In her life on Earth, many guys hit on her, calling out to Heijin repeatedly. Yuvazin thinks she had a line of men trying to help her. Her chat shouts that this damn please save had a witch before losing his life. The Sky Prince donates 15 balloons to comfort her, and Heijin says it was her fault and thanks him. Another fan sends 20 balloons saying she did nothing wrong, and the girl thanks him too. Her number 1 fan, the Ethics Queen Bee, enters the room and the girl celebrates. Heijin thinks this was her only real fan channel, and he earned that title after watching 200 hours and sending 1,000 balloons. The Queen Bee sends 100 balloons saying that if she keeps acting like this, she should tell him, because she's going to scold him hard. Instant Beauty replies that she'll let him know if she needs help, thinking that men always like to be on the front lines. She sighs, realizing she needs to take a break and think about the situation since the passage is blocked. She comments that please save never said that specifically, but she's sure he doesn't have the arrow either. She takes off her vest and her chat goes crazy, thanking her. They ask what the girl is going to do as she walks to the edge. Heijin stares coldly at the river and jumps straight into it. In-sung looks at the shop items, saying he doesn't need to know because he's not going to take them. He wonders if he really needs the first arrow while tracing his finger through the sand. Back on the bridge, a hand manages to cling to the edge. Heijin says she knew it, and that she was right. She can dodge the traps as long as she stays on the edge, and her chat praises her for it. The girl explains that she got a hint while she was looking for the first arrow and fell. She thinks the problem is just how long the path is as she lets go with one hand, but grabs on again right away, thinking she has to hold on no matter what. At the door, In-sung thinks the first floor was turtles, the second was chickens, and the third was mountains. So the rest should follow that pattern. One of those must be the theme of the 4th floor. Dirty floors, great walls, iron gates, and live honey. He can only buy water, bread, and armor from the shop, and none of it correlates. But then he breaks the arrow, notices something different, and shouts that it's bamboo. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Heijin is still hanging. She says she's reached her limit and thinks she's about to fall, but she has to endure a little longer. She's almost there. She tries to climb up and thinks she can't. She sits at the edge to rest when something quickly approaches. Another arrow strikes her arm. The girl groans in pain as she falls toward the honey. In-sung soaks the bamboo sticks in honey, and his chat says that should be enough for him. He says the honey provides life force and then drives the bamboo into the ground. The reason the floor was sand was exactly for this, and the chat comments that he's a genius, asking when it will grow. Because bamboo takes a long time to grow tall, and this was peak creativity. Heisu falls into the honey, unconscious. In a national Aikido hall, a teacher guides his students. He shouts at them to repeat twice and asks how they would survive in a tiger's den. Hasu answers that they should become a tiger. Her teacher confirms they must never give up, no matter the situation, because there's always a way to overcome a problem. The girl asks her father how to become a tiger, and then wakes up inside the honey of life. In-sung rests in front of the gate, thinking that bamboo normally grows 4 or 5 meters tall, but this would have to reach more than 20. He's hungry and should probably buy some bread. Then suddenly remembers the growth accelerator. It was 100 times better. It had made the chickens grow in just 3 days. He wonders if it has no limits when used on plants. Another streamer enters floor 4, leaving only 48 slots. He decides to open his inventory and take out the vial of growth accelerator. In-sung pours it onto the bamboo, saying he has to at least try. After a few seconds, the growth begins exponentially. Heisu manages to climb out of the honey of life, staggering forward. She pulls the arrow from her arm and says she absolutely has to get out of here. Either she has to become a tiger, so she swims away. In-sung braces himself between 2 bamboo stalks and uses them as support to climb upward. His fans comment that he'll be the first again, but they wanted to see him suffer. In-sung thinks humans have grown stronger, and he wouldn't be able to endure this if it weren't for the egg system. The chat shouts that he's reached the entrance, and once again, he's the first. In-sung declares that he won't stop here, that he has to keep moving forward, leaving everyone astonished. His chat asks what he's doing and tells him to stop wasting time and head to the bridge. They ask if he really thinks he can keep climbing higher like that. He thinks there are things coming down from the ceiling, and no matter how much he looks, they seem graspable. They must have been placed there for climbing. They're there for a reason. He shouts that he knows this and wonders if he can tell his chat, who ask if it's a tunnel. Clinging to the top of the bamboo, In Sung places his hands somewhere and thinks he's done it. His chat demands that he show it, but the young man says he'll show them once he's back on the ground. That bridge just so happens to be directly below him. So he lets go and lands safely, clutching the item. It's a celestial bamboo fruit, the favorite food of Phoenix, and consuming it increases life. The protagonist stores it back in his inventory so he won't lose it. He wonders if this might be the real entrance, or maybe a trap, but it's fine. There's no reason to think too deeply about it now. So he decides to go that way and enters the door. The system announces that it's a tunnel connecting to the 5th floor, and the protagonist celebrates. But suddenly, he falls endlessly through the ground. Outside on the bridge, Jesus wipes her clothes clean. She has fully recovered since applying the honey of life from room 3. She considers that there might be stairs here, and if she climbs them, they'll lead to the tunnel entrance. But before that, she dives into the honey. She thinks she needs to find the arrow she lost earlier, since glowing rocks are scattered there. It isn't difficult. She smiles, saying she really did find it, and then surfaces again. Climbing the stairs, she comments that now all she needs to do is return to the entrance and cross the tunnel to reach room 5. Elsewhere, In Sung is shouting for help as he falls. Finally, he crashes into a light, tumbles forward, and ends up kneeling. In Sung finds himself in a place completely distorted. He looks upward and mutters that it's a full moon. Jesus receives the system notice that In Sung was the first to enter room 5 with 49 slots remaining. She says it really does feel like there's something about him, but she'll catch up soon enough, and you should just wait. She's sure she isn't the only one thinking this. All the other challengers in room 4 must feel the same way. A man with green hair stops to comment that please save was first again. Another, dressed like a student, says he'll have to teach him an important life lesson soon. A girl remarks that without her cape she would have died and wonders why this guy is always so fast. In Sung thinks to himself that he has more than 900 balloons, a celestial bamboo fruit, and a random skill. He needs to save the fruit for emergencies, so for now he decides to open the skill. He receives something called Iron Will, and his chat is shocked. Judging from their reactions, In Sung assumes it's good. The system announces he has acquired the skill Iron Will and should check it. Iron Will doubles all physical stats for 3 minutes and activates automatically upon near death. He frowns, wondering about that, while his chat shouts that he thought it would be something amazing and had such high hopes. In Sung complains that it's a skill that only activates when he's about to die. One chat member says it's not completely useless, and that its true value will show later. He's reading through the chat, his attention caught by certain comments, and In Sung realizes he's been tricked. He grumbles that these people really are idiots. The system announces that in room 5 he can summon a manager and must choose wisely. Appointing a manager requires 100 balloons, and if he escapes room 7, new items will be added. He thinks it's a system meant to help and grant authority, while the chat begs to be chosen. In Sung decides it's obvious. He should summon the one who has given him attention and balloons from the very start, revealing that he will choose Mr. Reflection, to which the chat replies that it was expected. The system adds that if he wants additional managers, he'll have to reach a higher rank. A massive light suddenly radiates through the area. In Sung shields his face as a figure appears. An old man asks how long it has been. In Sung reflects that he's just a stranger, while the chat wonders why someone like that is watching television. In Sung notes his appearance and questions if he'll be able to communicate with him. The man asks if he's disappointed that he's just an old outsider, but the boy shakes his head. Then he introduces himself as Reflection 469. In the outside world, he's known by another name. His true name is Socrates. In Sung repeats the name and asks if he's the philosopher, and the old man confirms it. He asks whether the boy has never seen someone who has already lost their life before. In Sung says no, and Socrates understands. The protagonist asks why he's so good at Korean. Socrates tells him to try staying here for 2,000 years. In Sung asks how someone can remain in one place for 2,000 years without reincarnating or something like that, and Socrates points again to this place. Laughing, he says that hell was where he lived. You pay to be taken care of after you're born, spending even more money on food and baby items. Even if you graduate, you'll write reports until you're exhausted, and if you join a company, you might never buy a house in your whole life. When you die, your family pays for the funeral and judges how you lived. In Sung asks if he can't just change bodies, and Socrates notes he's worried about being old. The chat complains that their streamer is discriminating against the elderly. The young man says he only thought it was about age and asks why Socrates keeps putting words in his mouth, but Socrates finds it all amusing. Then a sound is heard from far away. A figure starts walking toward him. It reveals itself as a living monster, its lips seeming to sneer at In Sung. That zombie charges at him, grabbing the protagonist's arm to bite. Socrates tells him to deal with it before he starts bleeding. In Sung grabs its head and wrenches it off his arm, slamming it into the ground and shouting at it to get lost. The protagonist asks what that was, and Socrates approaches, saying he doesn't even know what the undead are. It won't die unless you deal with its head, and he's sure In-sung hasn't finished it. That monster will stand up and walk again in about half an hour, and In-sung mutters that this is hell. Socrates reminds him he has to clear out the dead while escaping the labyrinth, and he's bleeding heavily anyway. In-sung looks down and his chat jokes he'll bleed out and die. The protagonist reaches into his inventory and asks if the turtle slept well, since he's been feeding it and it needs to pay him back. He sets it to licking the wound. In-sung says he's healed now and his clothes really look awful. He changes into the ones he kept in his inventory, and Socrates remarks that he knows what it is to be in rough shape. The protagonist says the turtle will have to come with him. He opens the floor's shop right away. Wondering which weapon to buy, he's asked by Socrates whether he knows any weapon arts. He answers no, and the philosopher says that's good. He should buy a spear, humanity's oldest tool, very economical, and something everyone can learn. Swords are more for warriors. In-sung carefully weighs his options. He checks the pricier spears and counts 860 balloons. He figures the most expensive he can afford is the diamond spear. Socrates says he doesn't know the difficulty yet and should go with bamboo, but the chat disagrees. In-sung mentions the rusty spear. His fans say he could get the iron one for just 50 more balloons, but he still wants the rusty one. He decides on the iron spear, but everyone tells him to buy the strong iron spear, making him waver. In-sung says he'll buy that, and the chat says they'll add 200 more so he can get the 5-iron spear. Another person tells him to grab the diamond spear since it's better, and In-sung says that makes sense and he'll buy it. However, his chat stops him, telling him to beg for the first diamond spear. In-sung thinks he's a genius and starts calling for Mr. Socrates. The philosopher is taken aback, and the protagonist says he'll take the diamond one. He receives the item and thinks that 12 damage is a lot compared to what the dungeon offered before. The protagonist swings his spear, and his chat starts fawning over him. Socrates says the sun is going down and they should get moving. The system tells them both to step into the right place and to stand on the hexagon. He steps on it, and the system asks him to choose a difficulty, advanced, intermediate, or beginner, with better rewards for higher difficulty. In-sung thinks he can choose and is definitely going with beginner. Socrates tells him to pick advanced, repeating it several times. In-sung thinks the old man's opinion doesn't matter and tries to choose beginner, but Socrates insists on advanced. The system declares the difficulty set to advanced, asking how he could pick the easy route when the rewards are so good. They are transported straight into Rune 5 of the dungeon, to a desolate land, a labyrinth that can be escaped with determination and wisdom. In-sung notes that up to 4 people can go, and Socrates says in this case he can go with just one companion. Then he tells him to pay attention. An army of undead sprints toward them. In-sung dodges their attacks with the turtle on his shoulder. With his spear, the young man cleaves through everything in his path. Creatures crash to the ground, their heads severed from their bodies. Socrates warns that some are coming from above as well. One of the creatures drops toward him. He's struck by the monster's foot and pinned to the ground. In-sung refuses to accept it, wondering if he's about to die like this. Socrates releases a bluish aura toward the remaining undead. The protagonist watches as the creatures are driven away, clearing his path. Hands claw up over the young man's body while Socrates stands in front of him. The monsters recoil from the light, then are blasted away in an explosion. Socrates tells In-sung to watch closely. He's about to show the skills of someone 2,000 years old. The monsters charge toward him, and Socrates considers the situation, then tells the boy to watch him. One of the creatures rushes at him and attempts an attack. Socrates dodges the strike and assumes a stance to wield his spear. He thrusts downward, and the chat says it's a super powerful counterattack. Another creature tries to strike from behind, but Socrates was already prepared. He slashes through its neck, severing it from the rest of its body. Socrates plants his spear into the ground, and the chat begins to revere him. He tells In-sung telepathically that he has strong visual awareness and reaction speed thanks to the eggs, and his physique is solid as well. If they miss a strike, they won't be able to get into position for their next move. He needs to dodge and counterattack, and In-sung says he understands. Reflecting, he realizes more are coming. Socrates orders him to raise his spear and not just stand there thinking. He won't explain every detail of what he's doing and wonders how long the boy expects him to stay in control. A zombie swings at him with its long arm, but In-sung ducks, evades, and drives his spear into the creature's stomach, earning praise from the chat. The creature collapses to the ground, and the protagonist relentlessly stabs it with his spear. In-sung says he can feel it now, and his focus enhancement skill rises to level 3. The chat warns him not to get too excited and tells him to look behind, where the creature is writhing on the ground. He shouts that they're reviving, and the chat tells him to destroy the heads or use holy water. In-sung decides to buy it, and his chat tells him it's not something you drink. The boy says he'll use a little since it's precious, pouring it onto the creature's head. It thrashes, screaming, and he yells that it's still awake, so he pours holy water into its mouth. The zombie explodes immediately after. In-sung admits it scared him and says he had to use the whole bottle. At this rate, it costs 10 balloons to kill one, and he only has 150 left. The zombies writhe on the ground trying to get up. Socrates says knowledge is power, but the protagonist doesn't understand. He wonders if this is a direct descendant of the black turtle, so he sets the turtle on the ground, startling the zombie. The turtle radiates golden energy and In-sung panics, saying the mystical turtle is draining them. Socrates notes that it really works, and In-sung declares it's pure black turtle bloodline. It's like light mingled with darkness, controlling the dead and spirits, and the chat remarks that Socrates knows history too. In-sung thinks, more precisely, it's absorbing impure energy and sending souls back to life. That's how the turtle grows. Socrates says it's like how trees absorb carbon dioxide, calling it useless knowledge. The turtle finishes, absorbing all the energies. In-sung picks it up from the ground, saying it's different because it's a mystical creature, and he's the first human to feed one with chicken feed. The protagonist admits he was wrong, thinking that recognizing mistakes is a good thing. At first, he thought it was someone with a lot of balloons, so he thanks Socrates for everything he's done. He asks how to get out of there, and the philosopher asks if he knows the tale of the labyrinth, the part where a threat was used to escape. In-sung snaps his fingers and tosses a breadcrumb onto the ground. He says monsters don't eat that, and the chat comments that it makes no sense. He's mixing it up with the story of Hansel and Gretel. The boy then gets his system notification that Instant Beauty has entered the 5th floor, and the protagonist calls out to her. He walks along the trail thinking that it's been 2 days since Instant Beauty arrived, yet they still haven't made contact. He wonders if she'll complete it on her own. Either way, since the number of people required is fixed, they'll probably want everyone together. He wonders if he should send her a message, but if she tries anything funny, he'll lose all of his rest. He tosses breadcrumbs onto the ground. Socrates comments that night is falling and the light seems to be dimming, but in truth, the light isn't moving. Monsters won't react unless he gets close. They rely solely on scent. Since the monsters are gathered together, he should head somewhere else, but Socrates tells him to go straight toward them. In-sung asks why he should waste his strength by doing that, and as he continues forward, the philosopher asks why he doesn't just look for the easy path. Walking further, he notices something strange this time. In-sung says the way is blocked again and that it'll last for an hour. Socrates explains its design so they can't eavesdrop. The protagonist says there are monsters behind that barrier, and the philosopher replies that's exactly why they were led here. In-sung notices something on the ground and mutters that the breadcrumbs are gone. He wonders if the monsters ate them, but there aren't any birds around either. Then he hears a female voice calling from another direction. In-sung recognizes it as human and turns, seeing Hasu's foot. The girl is searching around, looking side to side. In-sung greets her, and the chat comments that they finally met here. He says it's nice to meet her, and Hasu reflects that he's tall and strong and not bad-looking either. The protagonist notices she's carrying an indestructible sword worth 1,600 balloons, so she must be rich. Socrates remarks that she's being possessed by her manager and will speak in that way. Hasu asks why he's whispering and if he's the shy type, while the chat ridicules him. Socrates scowls at the girl and tells In-sung to ask her about the missing breadcrumbs. They both try to speak at the same time, but Hasu yields and lets the protagonist go first. He asks if she picked up the bread pieces from the ground. The girl grows frustrated and asks if that's really what he wanted to say, while the protagonist assumes she ate them. Hasu angrily asks if he thinks she's a beggar. She says she brought plenty of bread from room 4 and didn't touch them. She's no pigeon. In-sung replies that anyone is capable of making mistakes, and anyone would commit them if they didn't want to live, and Socrates agrees. Hasu demands to know why the old man is interfering, and he snaps back. Saying he's older than the history of Seoul, Hasu calls him rude and more like an idiot. She says this is all really irritating, then notices something unusual. The girl comments on the turtle and asks where it came from. In-sung answers that it's not just a turtle, but a mystical being. The girl asks again if it didn't eat the breadcrumbs. The protagonist says it's a sacred creature, not one that eats bread off the ground, and even if it tried, he wouldn't allow it. His chat comments that he fed it chicken feed, and Hasu asks if she's worse than the animal, and if he's just raising his voice at her. The chat comments that no one has ever gotten mad at her before, and the turtle growls at her. Hitsu asks her ethics queen bee to come out and do something about it since he can see she's struggling now. Socrates asks if that's the so-called ethics queen bee, because that manager has been causing a ton of problems recently. He tells him to come out now. In-sung says it's fine and that he'll assume she did meet the breadcrumbs, while Hasu insists it's the truth. The protagonist apologizes and takes back what he said. He admits he was rude since it's their first time meeting, and Hasu says it's fine. In-sung suggests that since 4 people are needed at this level, they should work together. She stares at him for a moment, then says that's exactly what she was thinking too. They both turn, and the boy asks about heading to the place where the monsters are gathering, but Hasu refuses, saying something important seems about to happen here. Socrates remarks that she clearly knows a thing or two. Time passes, and the philosopher notes that the undead don't seem to see or hear them. In-sung reflects that she isn't an ordinary person, but since there are 8 monsters, he'll take care of 4 of them. The girl charges forward before he finishes speaking and engages one of the monsters. In-sung thinks she's so fast it looks like teleportation. Hasu raises her sword for a downward strike and cleaves the creature in half. Then she glances back to see more corpses approaching. In-sung tightens his grip on his spear, saying he won't lose to her. He activates his focus enhancement skill and charges toward a group of creatures. A thrust into one of the creatures catches Hazu's attention. The protagonist says she can thank him later, but the girl tells him to keep dreaming. Insung swings his spear behind his head and splits a creature cleanly in half. His chat comments that he's definitely talented. The protagonist thanks everyone for their comments and keeps moving forward. Hesu does the same with her fans, thinking that tons of balloons are pouring in. Insung looks down and finds a bull's chest, thinking it's something protected, while Hesu suggests they open it. The protagonist is surprised to discover a scroll inside that reveals the exit. He says he'll take a look, but Hesu warns that it will attract monsters. Insung glances at the corpse of a zombie and decides to store it in his inventory to deal with the remaining monsters. Hesu says that since they need to buy holy water, they should go that way. The protagonist smiles and asks how many flasks she has, 5 in total. Insung says he'll take care of all the monsters, and in exchange, she should share the holy water. He doesn't have much on him, and the girl asks if he plans to drink it like normal water. She also wants to know how many balloons he has, but shortly after, she accepts the deal between them. Insung sets the small turtle on the ground, and it begins absorbing the energy. Hesu asks if it isn't just a normal turtle, but the protagonist replies that it's a mystical creature, a descendant of the black turtle. The little one keeps absorbing all the monsters with great effort. The undead disintegrate, and a few minutes later, the chat comments that she seems faster after eating. Insung reflects that these monsters have a strong sense of smell, but they can surely strike in the right direction. The turtle is about to eat the corpses, but the protagonist tells it to wait a minute. Hesu remarks that one of the zombies is already reviving, but in front of them, the protagonist takes out the celestial fruit. She asks what he pulled out, and the boy says it's a sacred item containing immense life force. He asks Mr. Socrates to hold it for him, and to stay by Hesu's side because it'll only take a little while. Socrates asks what on earth is going on. This time, the zombie charges toward the group. Socrates tries to figure out what's happening, but the zombie lunges at him. He strikes the monster's face, asking if it's lost its mind since it's already dead. The zombie grabs his shoulder, but Hesu delivers a clean slash across its back. The creature collapses, and Socrates asks why the undead would attack at all. He wonders if it could be the fruit, and Insung confirms the hypothesis. They're reacting to the life force, not the scent. In that case, there's a way to distract them while they read the map. Socrates suggests that since Insung asked him to hold it, he should use the fruit to lure the monsters away. And if he's really going to use something so dangerous that way, but Insung refuses. He says he only needs to take a small bite, then run while the life force fades. He thinks it's the perfect plan to escape. Socrates flatly rejects the plan. Insung insists it's a decent plan, and Hesu asks why he won't do it. The philosopher asks why her manager doesn't come out instead of making him run alone. He tells them to do it together, and Insung agrees with his manager. Hesu calls for the queen bee to come out, warning she'll glare at him if he doesn't show. An aura manifests in the middle of the trio. Socrates shouts that he knew it, and a man approaches, saying it's been a while. That man was Plato, Socrates' student. The chat says they're just acting out of nowhere, and that it isn't important right now. Hesu asks if the queen bee is actually Plato. Socrates complains that he hasn't seen him recently, and wants to know what kind of nonsense he's been up to. Plato admits he was hiding because he was ashamed to face his teacher. Plato asks what he's doing here, and Socrates replies it's just a small pastime. The other philosopher says the same. The teacher, if you can call it a hobby, once asked a female streamer to dance on the stairs, and Plato tries to deny it. A loyal fan of Please Save sends 10 balloons, telling them to consider it a platonic love, and the chat jokes that he's a dark version of himself. Hesu says she's disappointed in him for acting like that, especially since he's so famous. Plato tries to deny it, saying his past doesn't matter. Now he is the queen bee, an existence that depends on her to be happy, but Socrates punches him in the face. Hesu tells them to stop this reunion and decide who's going to run. Socrates reminds them it was already revealed the moment her manager turned out to be his student. He says he'll run, and since he hates doing it, he'll temporarily possess Insung. He orders him to keep an eye on the map, but the protagonist says he doesn't know how long he can hold it open, and Hesu tells him to just do it. The map unfolds, showing a blue line. Insung complains that the map is too complicated, and the system warns that 73 monsters will be within range in less than 20 seconds. The boy mutters that this is bad, but Hesu says it's the exit. He feels pressure as the system warns that 1,033 monsters are 10 seconds away. Hesu tells him to close the map, leaving Insung confused. She explains that she memorized everything and he should shut it now, just as the monsters come into view. Insung stows the map and tells Plato to handle the celestial bamboo fruit. The philosopher takes a piece and says they'll meet again later as he runs. He grumbles that if they catch him, they'll cut his body into pieces, which is frustrating, but his teacher will just have to wait. Insung says they really did follow him and tells Hesu to be trusted, while she warns that they'll have to turn right. At Korea University, she was known as Kim Tae-gi, a beautiful and popular actress. She calls out that now they should turn left, and they keep running. The girl guides them through the maze, alternating between left and right. She says they finally reached the exclamation point marked on the map and should turn right there again. After that, they'll run straight forward without stopping. Hesu says they've reached the platform and both of them climb up, but the system announces they cannot return to room 4. The protagonist realizes this was the entrance, not the exit. He asks what the hell this is, but Hesu insists she didn't make a mistake. In-sung says she's been trying to take first place since they got here, but the girl claims she didn't do it intentionally. He complains he can't trust humans, and Hesu tries to deny it again. The protagonist notices something different. He had dropped breadcrumbs along the way, but they had vanished again. He tries to imagine what it could mean, and when Hesu asks, he replies that it's symmetrical. The girl looks confused, so In-sung draws on the ground showing the labyrinth and themselves. Because the map is symmetrical, the entrance and exit can be swapped without the participants knowing. Hesu complains that it's cheating, and In-sung says that's exactly the kind of place they're in. Socrates appears and says he's really understood. In-sung asks why he didn't say anything if he knew, and the philosopher explains he can't give spoilers. It's a serious sin. The boy assumes that's why he possessed his body earlier to avoid running, and the chat complains he's annoying. In-sung suggests they retrace their steps, and Hesu says it's possible since she memorized everything. From this point though, it's useless if the entrance and exit are swapped again. A massive plaque suddenly appears, warning them that they can't remain at the entrance too long or they'll enrage the great spectre. In-sung repeats the words and asks what the hell that's supposed to mean. The system announces that the moon is growing weaker and monsters will move more freely. If they want to survive, they must run toward the hole in the center. For the great spectre has been revived, revealing a colossal creature at the heart of a labyrinth. In-sung asks if they really expect him to fight that thing. The chat comments that it will never be defeated, saying that this is the difference between hard and intermediate difficulty, while Hesu suggests they run. She tells him to head toward the hole in the center if they want to survive, and Socrates calls out to his streamer, saying that if he runs, he'll possess his body again. Zombies rise from the ground and Hesu pulls him along to run. On the way, the two of them stop at the center of a thicket. In-sung mutters that it's too exhausting to keep this up, but something feels strange and Hesu asks what. The protagonist explains that the moon has seemed smaller since they were at the entrance. Hesu agrees and Socrates asks to be teleported. He questions if In-sung hasn't noticed something. In-sung realizes the monsters can't step into this area. He answers that he understands because the 10 symbols of longevity, the theme here, must be the moon. The chat calls him crazy, but the protagonist explains that they began moving more freely as the light weakened. They can't come here because the light shines directly. But it isn't the true moon, and since it's false, its shape doesn't change with time. Hesu says that even if the shape doesn't change, the light has grown dimmer, and In-sung adds that he thinks it's related to the moon growing larger. The spectre appears before them. Hesu asks what they should do, and In-sung says there's a way. She presses him for an answer, and the boy explains the moon is larger, but the light shining from it grows weaker. It's like a lantern covered by several layers of bags. Hesu asks what would happen if they remove them. The spectre stretches out its hand, which turns into tentacles that grab the girl. It pulls her close to its body, and Hesu struggles to resist. She drags her sword into the tentacle, only to be hurled to the ground. The girl is thrown flying, and In-sung asks if she's alright. The boy thinks it makes no sense for him to deal with this monster in the first place, so he raises his spear and declares that he'll strike the moon. The boy takes the stance of a professional thrower and hurls his weapon toward the sky. The tip of the blade finally touches the moon, but it's repelled, driven back down into the ground. He questions if his spear is too weak as the darkness thickens around them. Gripping his spear tightly, he hears the chat saying he should start saying his goodbyes. Socrates tells him to buy the strongest one of all, and In-sung asks him to just gift it. The philosopher replies that he'll only give balloons if the boy's ideas prove their worth. If he can't end this dungeon, then it will end him. In-sung looks at Hesu lying on the ground and says he doesn't know anymore as he readies his stance again. This time, he hurls it at the monster. The great spectre roars as it's struck, the blade driving closer to its head, while the chat comments that he's strong. The weapon nears the creature's eye, only to shatter against its forehead. In-sung stares nervously as the chat says it's useless and mocks that maybe the great spectre is just a great loser. The spectre lashes its tentacles for the protagonist to bind him. He dodges, throwing his body to the side. Then he steadies himself and picks up Hesu's sword. He slashes the tentacle in two while the chat says this is the last attempt. The creature roars again, bellowing as it gathers blood in its mouth. In-sung activates his focus enhancement skill and warns that he doesn't know what will happen, but something is about to unfold here. The protagonist charges forward, saying that even if it's a monster, it must have a weak point and he'll cut it down with his sword. Dodging the strikes of the tentacles, he leaps upward. In-sung swings his sword side to side, slicing through the tentacles. He reflects that he's almost there, right in front of its weak point. The monster lashes out with its tentacles, grabbing the boy and yanking him backward. Then it slams him into the ground, while In-sung thinks that he used his strength and focus, yet felt nothing afterward. He draws his sword and slashes downward, but blood continues to gush from his mouth as he crashes against the floor. The creature rises and throws him down once again. The chat comments that this must be the limit of how far the protagonist can go, as he rolls across the ground. He comes to rest beside Jesus, and the chat jokes that she's just pretending to be dead. The monsters surround the two of them, and his fans complain that time is running out. In-sung spits blood, unconscious, but his heart beats differently this time. The Iron Will skill activates, and he rises to his feet. The system announces that all physical damage will now be reversed. For 3 minutes, all physical stats will be doubled. In-sung asks if he came back to life after nearly falling into hell, while the chat cheers for a good fight now. The system warns that all the damage will return after 3 minutes. In-sung thinks that even with this power, he can't kill that bastard spectre. He needs a way to strike the moon. The creature's tentacles whip toward him, but the protagonist simply slashes them apart with ease. The monster roars again, writhing in pain. In-sung thinks the sword was made for cutting, not piercing the moon. He needs the indestructible spear. He begs Socrates to hand over the item. Socrates hides behind the zombies, saying the brat is trying to make him lose. In-sung drops to his knees, asking if he's really just going to die here. But suddenly, he receives a gift and wonders who it's from. Instant Beauty donates 1,200 balloons to the protagonist, and he turns toward Jesus. The girl raises her thumb despite the pain in her stomach. She says that even if they die here, they still have to try to defeat this stupid dungeon, and thinks that it's up to him. The system announces that Iron Will remain active for another 30 minutes, and Jesus asks for the sword. She'll handle the monsters while he must hurry and throw the spear, slicing through a few tentacles. The protagonist buys the item listed in the shop, and the system notifies him. He receives the golden spear, with an attack power of 14. He slaps his own face, then charges forward as the chat says he's heading to the wrong place. Jesus calls out to him as the great spectre swings its hand. In-sung dodges and leaps onto the monster's arm. He climbs upward, centimeter by centimeter, scaling his body. Reaching its shoulder, he dodges its attacks. In-sung steadies himself, then leaps toward its head. He uses the surface as his springboard for his final jump. He readies his spear for the throw, gripping it tightly before hurling it. Jesus realizes he wants to get as close to the moon as possible. The spear soars higher and higher as the great spectre opens its mouth. The weapon strikes the moon, beginning to fracture it into countless pieces. The spectre stares at the moon as it shatters, revealing the true one behind it. His chat comments that the moon was shining brighter because the shell had gotten thinner. Everyone there watches in awe at the protagonist's power. The zombies roar as they charge forward, and In-sung lands on the ground. He reflects that even the great spectre was struggling to withstand the full intensity of the moonlight. The turtle on his shoulder makes a small noise. In-sung places it on the ground, saying that all of this was its meal. The creature then begins absorbing the body of the great spectre bit by bit. The system notifies them that Dungeon 5 has been cleared. The turtle can now evolve into the advanced grade, and the protagonist has obtained the Great Spectre Stone. In-sung repeats this in surprise and becomes enveloped in golden energy. The system reminds him that there are only 5 seconds left before his Iron Will runs out, and the young man thinks he will lose his life no matter what. But it had been fun, and his chat says he won a battle that was already lost. That's when he remembers vitality, and that he still has the celestial bamboo fruit. The young man eats a piece, and the system notifies the end of the ability. In-sung drops to his knees, feeling pain in every corner of his body. He spits blood, groaning from the suffering, and collapses unconscious on the ground. Jesus runs toward him, worried. Socrates touches his neck, confirming that the protagonist is still alive. Plato asks what on earth had just happened there. A few hours later, In-sung rises, screaming in shock. His chat comments that he was really lucky to survive that. The protagonist looks at his wrist, where the turtle had been healing him the whole time. Socrates tells him he was unconscious for an entire day, and the chat says it's time for the legend to continue. It was a miracle he managed to fight the Great Spectre, considered elite even among the advanced grade, and In-sung thinks that he managed to obtain its essence. He opens his inventory and sees the Soul Stone item, which allows him to acquire one of the Great Spectre's abilities at random. The young man asks if Socrates knows where he can get a soul extractor. Socrates replies that it's in the next room of the dungeon, and the chat grows excited. In-sung asks if he can say that much, and Socrates responds that telling him to go to a cafe and drink coffee wasn't exactly a spoiler. The protagonist comments that the evolution stone was essential for survival, and nothing came for free. He had also leveled up his Iron Will, but thinks he would rather avoid using it again. Socrates congratulates In-sung on a job well done. He admits he was surprised at such a level of difficulty, and the protagonist replies that you only live once. But he wonders where Jesus could be, and it was clear that after clearing that room, she had gone to the next one. Socrates explains that the girl was waiting at the exit. He reminds In-sung that she had said it was bad to leave someone unconscious alone, and since she cleared the dungeon with his help, she would give him first place. Socrates says that's what she had said, and it was truly unexpected. At the exit, Jesus calls out to him and tells him she thought he would lose his life this time, but he managed to endure. And beyond that, he was able to breathe thanks to mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. In-sung repeats this, stunned, but Jesus clarifies that it was Socrates who gave it to him. And on top of that, he will take first place, so they should hurry to the next room. In-sung asks if she really will give him first place, and the girl tells him to go before she changes her mind. It had been a while since she had been busy listening to the elder. Socrates scolds Plato, and the chat jokes that old men always have too much to say. In-sung says it would be good to see her again, and the girl agrees. Plato tells him to survive, and the protagonist replies that he will do his best. Heading to the exit platform, the bluish aura carries him far away. The system notifies that he has entered room 6, and a total of 40 people can go there. In-sung looks impressed at another system announcement. It states that the dungeon had been cleared on the highest difficulty for the first time in 1,351 years by Yamra in the special stage, and fans received discounts. His chat erupts saying they had dreamed of this day and would wash his feet now. Socrates gifts 100 balloons to the protagonist. The chat asks if there were no horses in this game, calling In-sung adorable. His system rewards him with a coupon for 50% off in the store for being the first to enter the room. In-sung thinks he needs to choose a door now, and the chat urges him to go for the red one. The young man chooses the door, thinking the result wouldn't change no matter what he picked. The shop was now accessible because he had entered the red city. In-sung shouts that everything being red was terrifying. He looks at the turtle and comments that it should rest in the inventory since there was no clue about the current situation. A blacksmith comes out of his house and notices the protagonist. Furious, he calls him a bastard and charges toward him. In-sung thinks the man is truly massive and extremely fast as he closes in. The protagonist manages to dodge his fist, and the blacksmith says he'll do it 10 more times for trying to run away. Now he's looking for a fight, while the chat laughs at In-sung's situation. In-sung thinks he has no time to fight this crazy guy and decides to run. As he moves, he spots the shop. He can only buy tonics, sleeping pills, and psychotherapy, and the protagonist says he doesn't know how to deal with this. The blacksmith grabs his shirt and lifts him high up. He slams him into the ground, and In-sung struggles to get up. The blacksmith tells him not to forget the favor he did, and In-sung questions when that was. He explains that he wanted to bring a knife but brought a bottle instead, then smashes it on the boy's head. The blacksmith yells that he'll hit him 20 more times on his tab and strikes with the bottle again. In-sung can barely defend himself with the spear and wonders why he can't resist. The blacksmith grows even angrier, and the protagonist tries to say he has the wrong person, that he's just a spirit. The man raises the bottle again, and In-sung begs for strength in his hands. His spear slips down the fat man's back, and his head is struck once more by the bottle. In-sung loses consciousness, and the fat man drags him inside the house. He then starts slicing a cucumber and tossing it into a hot pan to cook. In-sung lies asleep on the kitchen table. Then he suddenly wakes up with his head aching and tries to recognize the place. The blacksmith suddenly appears in the same room, and the chat thinks he must be panicking now. The fat man orders the protagonist to eat the rice. He declares that from now on, he'll have 3 meals a day, while In-sung wonders how they don't even know each other. But the rice looked delicious, and he wonders if he could cure this guy's brain with the psychotherapy available at the shop. The blacksmith orders him to eat, and the protagonist accepts, bringing a spoonful of rice to his mouth. Suddenly, the blacksmith realizes something, and In-sung smiles at him. Then he collapses forward, his head hitting the table, unconscious. In-sung thinks that sleeping pills were put into his food while he was distracted. But he wonders how he can't handle this old man when he managed to defeat the great spectre. It seemed as if it had been intentionally designed that way, and besides, he needed to get out of there first. In-sung notices that the door won't open, nor the windows. He tries to use a chair from the table to strike at them, but it only produces dust, and the chair rebounds, hitting him on the head. He falls to the ground, groaning in pain, and the protagonist mutters that he probably has about 2 months left to live. The protagonist decides to first contact Instant Beauty, but the system notifies him that Jesus cannot receive messages right now. In-sung comments that she must have entered the blue door and grabs a bottle, saying that before leaving this place, he should make that cursed blacksmith suffer, raising his arm to strike his head. But a barrier blocks him, and the system alerts that the clan's protection has been activated. In-sung wonders what that could be and tries to strike multiple times, but it seems a spell had been cast over that stall. In-sung knocks the rice onto the table and picks up the plate, until he notices a system notification. It informs him that the plate is actually a soul extractor capable of drawing abilities out. The young man remembers the soul stone in the Great Spectre. He places the stone onto the plate, and the soul begins to be extracted. The system announces that the hunting instinct ability has been acquired and tells him to check the status window. This ability allowed him to detect life force within a range of 5 meters. In-sung reflects that it isn't anything special and wonders why he feels so biased about it. There's nothing remarkable there, just the kitchen, and he questions what kind of room this was. Opening the door, he notices there was no lock. The young man is stunned when he comes face to face with all kinds of equipment. The system notifies that Dungeon 6 is a village that provides supplies for clan members. In-sung thinks these items are very useful. He notices that the reinforced adamant spear costs 3,000 balloons. Complaining that the glass is blocking him, the chat comments that it looked like a peaceful black market. In-sung says it had a scratch and the weapon was definitely his, but that didn't mean he had stolen them all. He looks back, grabs the bottle, and says it doesn't count as stealing if he's taking what's his. He strikes the glass, shouting that it's all because of his reinforced adamant spear. Swinging with all of his strength, the bottle rebounds into his own face. In-sung collapses to the ground in pain, and the system asks if he wants to buy the spear. The 50% discount from the village shop is then applied, and the spear is purchased for only 1,500 balloons. He gets back up, saying it was too irritating and better to finish this quickly. He could explore this place afterward. The young man notices something different and says that crystal was expensive for no reason, wondering how it could cost more than his spear. But there was no one who would buy something so useless. It was just a bad item. He spots the advanced evolution stone priced at 500 balloons and admits there were good things there. The little turtle would just have to wait a bit longer. The system announces that the great spectre's hunting instinct has activated and a life force has been detected within range. In-sung suddenly turns as the bottle strikes his head. The blacksmith knocks him out cold on the spot. The next day, he adds more food, saying he'll give him another dish if he doesn't finish that one. In-sung complains that it's fried rice again today, and the blacksmith replies it will be the same tomorrow. And you should already know that since he'll be spending the rest of his life here. In-sung asks if they can't cook different types of rice, and the blacksmith tells him to be grateful for what he's getting. He hands him the spoon, saying if he won't eat it, then just make sure to fill his stomach. The protagonist reflects that this marks his 14th day here. In-sung asks if they can at least eat on separate plates like before, but the blacksmith warns him he'll try using sleeping pills again. Night passes and In-sung asks if he can wash the dishes, but the blacksmith says he's in charge of the kitchen. Then he tosses a rag at the protagonist's face, telling him to wash the floor. In-sung moves around cleaning everything. The system notifies that another person has entered the dungeon and up to 55 people can now join. In-sung thinks that makes 5 of them now, and it's not his turn to act yet. He then asks what's for dinner, and the blacksmith grumbles that he's not his servant. He's in charge of the kitchen, and the protagonist can't do anything about it. He should know it'll be red pepper rice for dinner, and In-sung simply agrees. He then sits down to reflect on the sofa. He thinks that he learned how to open the front door by watching the old man while he stayed there. The red village must have been created with one of the symbols of longevity. But since this was the red village, it was impossible for the dungeon to have 2 themes. His clue was that both the blue and red villages existed. So he reaches the conclusion that together they form purple. In-sung realizes what it must be and thinks it's amethyst, since its color is purple. He should calm down since he might find a use for this amethyst after buying it, but he needed to confirm something first. The next day in the house, the blacksmith makes more rice. In-sung calls out to the chief, but the blacksmith gets annoyed at this. The protagonist asks if he knows about clan protection. The old man turns, demanding he explain how he knew those words. In-sung says it was from the time he slipped him sleeping pills and heard the words about the clan's protection being activated. The blacksmith says this bastard is trying to send him to his grave. In-sung answers that the blacksmith is still alive here. He wants to know what this clan protection thing is, while the blacksmith explains it was a sad legend about an alliance between villages. In-sung asks what kind of legend, but the blacksmith replies he doesn't believe in it, and that bastard should eat some rice. The protagonist asks what kind they had today, but the blacksmith tells him he should eat whatever is given. In-sung retorts that the blacksmith should eat it, and the old man says he will be the first to eat. The protagonist comments that he must have thought of sleeping pills again. The blacksmith grabs a bottle and says they'll talk after he eats. In-sung eats without complaint, and the blacksmith just accepts it. So they eat together until the old man collapses on the table, unconscious. The chat is surprised by this, and the turtle comes walking out of the kitchen. In-sung picks it up in his hand and tells it did well. He had ordered little Guai to slip sleeping pills into the rice, and the chat wonders since they both ate the same rice. The young man takes out the tonic in his hand, showing he won't sleep for the next 24 hours. He feels like he won't fall asleep even if he grows drowsy. In-sung reflects that now he'll buy the amethyst and think of it that way, but he wants to buy one more thing first. He buys the advanced evolution stones. The protagonist says he'll use them later since the old man might wake up at any moment. Now he goes to buy the amethyst, but notices his reinforced adamant spear isn't there. The young man thinks he made that choice and should proceed with the amethyst. But he thinks that if the amethyst isn't the item that means escape, then his fans will leave, everything will end, and he'll be stuck eating fried rice forever. The system asks if he wants to buy the amethyst, saying it can be purchased for 2,000 balloons with a discount. He stops hesitating, saying that's it, he just needs to believe. Now he has to figure out how to use it, while the chat says he really hasn't given up. In-sung looks at the amethyst and thinks he needs to get out of here, but he doesn't find a way and wonders what he should try. Other than just shaking it, he flips the amethyst stone. In-sung questions why it isn't working, why it isn't sending him back. He sighs a little as the blacksmith starts regaining consciousness. The blacksmith lifts his face from the rice and In-sung says he had started. There's nothing left in the shop, and he opens it again to see what else he can buy. In-sung notices that if he reads the first letters, there's a sequence, and the chat says he finally realized it. The protagonist thinks the price must be the order to use, so he moves it 4 times to the right and 6 to the left. The old man begins to lift his head, fully aware now. He says the protagonist has taken the amethyst, and In-sung reflects that it's not working, and you should turn it left and right again. The blacksmith tries to strike him, yelling at him to receive punishment, but In-sung dodges the blow and moves it 4 times to the right. The blacksmith swings again, and the protagonist evades, turning it 6 times to the left. Finally, the old man lifts his foot and slams it into the boy's chest, hurling him as far as he can. While in the air, In-sung spins the amethyst 9 times to the right. As the blacksmith approaches, he says the only option left is to stay there and eat fried rice forever. The young man repeats the word food, and the system announces that the path to Dungeon 7 has been opened. He finds himself on the platform and thanks him for the food, while his chat comments that this is his 4th consecutive first place. The protagonist disappears from the place, and the blacksmith curses, saying he's alone again. Then he receives a notification that So Wakhang has entered the dungeon, leaving only 54 people who can remain. The red door opens, and the blacksmith charges toward that bastard, while the man tries to resist. The system announces that he was the first to enter room 7, that he will receive a skill box, and that up to 39 more people may enter. In-sung looks around thinking it's a small room and that it must be a training gym. The young man notices the red door, and the system warns that a monster waits on the other side, so he needs to grow stronger in order to escape. In-sung concludes that it must be a one-on-one battle against the boss. He sits down on the bench press and curses the dungeon. He thinks he should use this exercise to strengthen himself. It was like a full-on prison camp, and they even provided supplies. But first, he wanted to check his random skill. The young man thinks he doesn't feel anything unusual upon receiving it, and the chat calls him a complete pervert. The skill was equipment enhancement, allowing him to grow stronger in proportion to the power of his gear. So he opens his inventory and places the turtle on the ground, announcing that it's time for Little Boy to evolve. He had to choose between the earth attribute or water, and the young man thinks he cannot afford to choose wrong. But clearly it had to be water, so he selects it. Energy floods the stone, and the system states that Little Boy will evolve into the advanced water grade. It adds that he will revert to normal if he runs out of energy, that the same evolution cannot be reused, and that he may weaken somewhat after evolving. The turtle's new form is blue, with abilities to manipulate water as part of its body and to summon divine water. The protagonist says Little Wei has grown larger, and the chat makes a Pokemon Squirtle reference. In-sung says that without any particular reason, water is the attribute that best fits a turtle, and so he sends it back into his inventory. Another notification appears, this time a message from someone in the first hub. Lenny of the Blood Clan introduces herself, saying she has always watched Lord In-sung, who takes the lead, and that they are the top guild recognized by Hades. They could only send messages because the Red Village is under their administration. In-sung thinks that means the Red Village is property of the Blood Clan, and that's what the clan blessing notification meant. Lenny says that all guilds seek to escape the dungeon and asks him to join them, promising that all answers to his questions lie in Hub 1. The protagonist thinks that escaping from Room 10 leads to Central Point 1. She reminds him that the Blood Clan is a famous place, since he even received an invitation, and the chat comments that joining would make him one of the best. They want to know more about the Blue Village and say they will contact Instant Beauty there. The protagonist decides to think about that later, because what he needs now is to escape from Room 7 of the dungeon. The system announces that life force has been detected nearby, and the Great Spectre's hunting instinct is activated. In-sung realizes there's a monster behind the door, and the notification asks if he wants to enter, warning that he cannot return if more than 5 minutes pass. A teleportation pad appears beneath his feet, and the protagonist is warped away. In-sung appears in another place and is stunned by the monster before him. It looked like a lion, but with a scorpion's tail. The protagonist wonders if this was the weak chimera and doesn't understand what could possibly be weak about it, especially since his live stream had just been shut off. So he decides to open the shop, seeing advanced food and a metal shovel. In-sung questions this, and the chat mocks him for not being able to buy items. He complains that he should have recovered his reinforced adamant spear instead of being stuck with this inferior one, so he has to remain cautious. The young man moves slowly to the side of the chimera. He notices its nose twitch slightly. The protagonist trembles in fear as the creature moves its mouth. In-sung freezes, paralyzed, and the chat comments how agonizing it is to watch. He activates enhanced effort, and the suffocating pressure vanishes. The protagonist's mind clears, and he loses the fear of moving. Vines grow across the ground, and it looks like an ancient gladiator's arena, with drops of water falling around. But it is cold there, while one of his fans donates 10 balloons, asking if he will become a legend, and the system warns he has 2 minutes to escape. He decides not to move this time and to return after the 2 minutes with a plan. Commander Doom Junwei is removed from the channel because of his inactivity, and the protagonist asks what that means. His chat explains it happens if you don't contribute voluntarily, and then Linny joins the channel. She sends an emergency alert just as the chimera awakens. The creature roars as loud as it can, forcing the protagonist back. The lion attacks with its claws. In-sung turns and dodges the strike. He complains that this is terrifying, and Linny sends 100 balloons, telling him to keep it up. In-sung swings his spear and dodges another strike from the monster's paw, with only 1 minute left before the teleport. The Chimera charges again, rushing straight at him. He thinks he was already running before things got boring. The protagonist says he will just mark the spot and make a quick run. The Chimera lunges once more, and the protagonist notices an opening on its belly. He drops low to the ground and activates weapon enhancement. Claiming he is the one who was able to pierce the moon, he strikes the Chimera's armor, but the blow fails to penetrate with enough force. The spear hits only metal, and the chat comments that this was the weak monster for him, its body made of iron. That creature glares at the protagonist with murderous intent. Then it swings its paw, ready to take his life. In-sung is thrown far back and rolls across the ground. The Chimera roars again, and the protagonist rises. He falls to his knees, looking down, depressed. He wonders what he should do, realizing he must run quickly. The system says 5 minutes have passed and asks if he wants to return to the waiting room. He accepts. In-sung steps onto the teleport pad and vanishes as the Chimera's claws crash down. The young man reappears kneeling in the training gym. The system declares that he failed the first attempt and that the weakened Chimera will recover some of its life. In-sung repeats this in frustration, and the system says the beloved system has healed the monster. He complains that this is horrible and that he'll never win if he keeps losing to that beast. But he had a small idea about the layout and managed to catch a glimpse of the exit door. So he pulls little Guai out of his inventory and asks him to heal him. The turtle radiates energy, and the system notes that Lil Guai is applying his tricks. Lenny donates 100 balloons to the protagonist, saying he cleared Dungeon 5 with all rewards, even though she heard he didn't have enough fans. The protagonist perks up, and she adds it's because he's actually amazing. He thanks the woman for that. The chat comments that the Blood Clan is flaunting its wealth, and Lenny says everyone is invited to watch the stream. In-sung thinks strange things have started happening suddenly, and Socrates is about to be crowned as #1 fan. The philosopher donates 100 balloons, saying someone had been talking badly about him behind his back. Lenny asks if this is the protagonist's manager and if he's really sure he's his biggest fan. Socrates sends another 100 balloons, insisting he's been #1 ever since the rookie mentioned it, and Lenny tells him not to worsen his financial troubles. The protagonist is impressed by this. Socrates declares that he should look closely, that his #1 fan isn't afraid to pay, making him the greatest of all. In-sung thanks him for everything and says he'll give it his all. The system notifies that all of his stats have been increased by 1%, and his body begins to change. An aura envelops the protagonist. Hours later, he is bench pressing heavy weight. It was an immense load, pushing him to his limits. After that, he performs a squat with the same weight on his back, and the chat is completely astonished. In-sung endures the weight and lowers himself as far as he can. Then he drops it when his hands begin to ache. He tosses some protein powder into his mouth and gulps it down with water. Lenny donates 50 balloons, saying she worked hard today too, and In-sung thanks her for it. But then he turns and says it's time to go in. He came with a plan: build muscle with exercise and protein, lure the Chimera with high-quality feed, and use that window to sprint in the opposite direction. Still wondering why the shop even sold a shovel, he decides that's exactly what he will do. The system asks if he wants to enter, and the protagonist confirms. Teleported in front of the Chimera, he admits he's still scared despite having a plan. He grips the spear tightly in his hand and dares the Chimera to come at him. The Chimera obeys the command and charges at him, trying to slash with its claw. In-sung pulls something from his inventory and orders the creature to eat it. He throws the high-quality feed and is surprised. The monster stops its attack to go eat the food. In-sung thanks it for that and thinks he can finally run toward the exit. So he dashes in that direction, but the Chimera turns its furious face toward him. The protagonist panics at the sight, trying to move silently so as not to anger the beast further. He reflects that it should have kept eating, but it was far too sensitive. Then he sighs in relief, saying it finally returned to eating. It seemed that the countless cavities in its body shrank as it devoured the feed. He shouts that it's time to try again, drawing the Chimera's attention. The protagonist swallows hard but continues running toward the door. The Chimera charges once again, ready to slash with its claws. The claws rake across the protagonist's back, but he falls through the gate just in time. The young man exhales, saying he would have been badly wounded if it had been a moment later, but the chat reminds him not to forget this. Then In-sung realizes there was no actual door there, he couldn't escape. The Chimera appears at the entrance, staring him down. He jokes that it can't come inside. Then he orders Lil Guai to heal his wounds. The Chimera opens its mouth and unleashes fire at him. The protagonist tries to dodge, thinking a fire breath like that was insane. But then he notices his head was on fire. His decision is to sprint back and forth. The Chimera prepares another burst of fire against him, but he tosses more feed, laughing as he orders it to eat. The Chimera shuts its mouth and quickly turns to devour the food. The protagonist tells Little Guai to hurry up and places the evolution stone on the ground. The system flashes several warnings and In-sung growls that he knows, telling it to hurry. Young Guai evolves and prepares a water orb to stop his hair from burning further. The water splashes onto the protagonist's head, revealing he was now bald. In-sung trembles in fear, standing by the wall, while the Chimera feeds on the rations. The Chimera roars again, and In-sung complies, throwing more food at it. Back in the training gym, the young man cries in front of the mirror. Socrates donates 10 balloons, saying there was a way to restore his hair. The protagonist's hope rises and he asks if it's really possible. But Socrates tells him to return to room 2 and buy growth accelerators. In-sung sits on the ground, bobbing his head up and down, sobbing. When he touches his scalp, he feels immense pain, making him cry even more. Little Guai licks his head, and In-sung mutters that this dungeon is a curse, while the system notifies him of his first failure since the chimera had grown stronger. He doesn't feel any stronger than last time, but the earth beneath him had cracked. On top of that, the vines had withered, and the chimera truly was the same. With no ideas left, it would be hard to win now. Lenny says that Lord In-sung could use his amethyst, and the protagonist is shocked. The girl explains that the amethyst carries her clan's blessing and that he can focus on it. The protagonist pulls the stone out of his inventory. Then he activates the level 3 focus enhancement skill. The amethyst increases his vitality, calms him, and his heart begins to find peace. The system asks if he wants to re-enter room 7. In-sung says he will finish this once and for all, and that it should stay quiet while he eats his food. But the system reminds him that he has none left. He used it all last time. The chimera unleashes a deafening roar. In-sung mutters that he'll eat a little more and should wait a minute, but the system warns that he cannot buy anything inside the arena and must face the chimera. In-sung asks for one more minute, begging for time. He runs while the chimera chases after him. The protagonist leaps forward as the monster swings its claw. Crouching on the ground, the protagonist is taken aback. That chimera unleashes another burst of fire. His solution to avoid the strike is to drop flat on the ground. He says he just wants to do a bit of investigation and wonders if he can survive for 5 minutes like this. In-sung digs his foot into the ground and the hunting instinct ability of the Great Spectre activates. He questions this, realizing it only triggers when life force is detected within 5 meters of the user. The young man glances back, noticing the burst of fire. He keeps running from it and even climbs the walls of the Colosseum. In-sung loops around and runs in another direction, while the chat is impressed by his speed. The chimera charges toward him and tries to strike with its scorpion tail. The system notifies him that 5 minutes have passed and asks if he wants to return. That creature swings its tail at him, and the protagonist says he wants to leave quickly. Once again, the platform appears and the young man vanishes. In-sung reappears in the gym and thinks he almost lost his life, but in return, he found a clue. So he should recover using the amethyst first and eat something. The young man falls asleep on the bench press, and his chat says he must have spent his school life the same way. A few days pass, and In-sung says he has bought enough feed. His ability detected traces of life force last time. Something was inside the chimera, and he had to go back to find it. Back in the arena, the chimera charges at him. In-sung tosses the feed to the massive beast. The chimera sniffs it, turns, and begins eating, and In-sung says there was something there. The Great Spectre's instincts suddenly activate. In-sung begins digging where he feels the presence. He thinks there must be a reason the shop sold a shovel, and the answer must lie beneath. That ruined battlefield had once been ground that turned to mud. The protagonist hears a sound and throws more feed to the chimera. In-sung digs deeper into the hole, while the chat jokes that he can't sell dirt if he keeps working like that. He keeps shoveling with all his strength. And after 5 minutes, he returns to the gym. In-sung thinks it has been 3 days since he started digging. The chimera doesn't care about his actions as long as he's underground, and that 5-meter range was broader than he expected. He keeps digging for a while until his shovel strikes stone. In-sung asks if this was finally it, if he had dug it up. He is shocked when he comes face to face with the item. It was the herb of immortality, which absorbs life energy from the surroundings to extend lifespan, and it works faster the closer it is to its target. The protagonist repeats this, holding it in his hand as the herb begins to absorb. He drops it immediately when he feels the effects, complaining that his hand had turned old. He quickly grabs the amethyst from his inventory, noticing that his hand returns to normal. In-sung receives a notification that someone named Hubbard has entered room 7, leaving only 38 more spots. He thinks he has never seen him in the rankings before and really expected Hisu to be the one to take second place. The chat seems to be big fans of him, so the protagonist decides to go meet him. In the training room, a man comments that this was Dungeon 7, where one escapes by becoming stronger, until he notices a notification from In-sung welcoming him. Hubbard smiles and repeats his name. A few minutes later, In-sung receives congratulations for passing, though he doesn't quite understand. Hubbard says he has accepted In-sung as his student, and that his initiation ceremony will be held on March 2nd. The protagonist calls him crazy, wondering if it's because he was beaten up by the old man. Hubbard tells the protagonist to come to him if there's anything he wants to ask. In-sung closes the chat window and says not to waste time on trivial things. In the gym, Hubbard mutters that the rookies these days are really shy, so he should get serious. Back in the cave, Lenny sends 100 balloons to In-sung, congratulating him for finding something so complicated. The young man wonders if this was some kind of rare item, and the chat tells him to go ahead and sell a herb. He realizes it and shouts that the theme of room 7 was the herb of immortality, and he was certain it would be useful in this situation. The protagonist takes the amethyst and slips it into his pocket first. Then he reaches for the herb and grabs it. He opens the vial that contained it, saying it truly was a very powerful energy. He was grateful the amethyst had stopped the aging in some parts of his body. The young man grabs his clothing and tears a strip. Outside the cave, little Gui pokes his head out. He looks around and the chat comments that he looks like a meerkat. Insung climbs out of the hole with his spear and notes he can't see the chimera. But the great specter's hunting instinct suddenly activates. Something strikes from above, a chimera using its wings. Insung instinctively thrusts his spear, revealing that the herb of immortality was stuck on the tip as it drives toward the chimera's mouth. The monster leaps back and hovers, trying to dodge the attack. Insung says it must be aware of the herb of immortality, since the place seemed more devastated each time he entered, and the chimera's increasing strength with each failure was due to it absorbing energy from the herb buried in the ground. The creature gathers fire in its mouth, and Insung braces himself while ordering the turtle to unleash water. Little Gwit charges a water ore between his horns and launches it, clashing with the chimera's fire. His chat comments that it looks like a pet battle. The chimera recoils and everyone cheers, hoping it won't be killed. Insung swings his spear side to side, using his level 3 focus enhancement. He declares that the reason it ate slowly wasn't because its teeth decayed, but because of stupid inflammation. The equipment enhancement activates and Insung hurls his spear. The blade, carrying the herb of immortality, pierces the back of the monster's throat. It begins to disintegrate and the protagonist gapes in shock. It had turned into nothing but the skeleton of the chimera radiating an aura. The protagonist retrieves his spear and approaches the skull, pulling something from the monster's mouth. The system notifies him that he is absorbing the chimera's soul essence, and his physical powers increase. The chimera's soul essence is completely absorbed. Something taps against the protagonist's foot, and he picks it up. It is revealed to be the tooth of the weak chimera, renowned for its toughness. Insung says his skill levels also increase, with weapon enhancement reaching level 2 and focus enhancement reaching level 4. The system opens the door, announcing that he has cleared room 7 and may proceed to the next. Insung gives thanks and continues walking without looking back, repeating that he will escape this cursed dungeon. The system announces that the streamer Please Save was the first to enter room 7 and will receive an F-rank skill box. Insung mutters that he really is talented for always taking first place, while his chat complains that he's just bragging. Suddenly, the protagonist's gravitational axis is inverted, sending him crashing to the ground, and when he looks forward, he comes face to face with a herd of deer. In room 8 was a place where the protagonist had to keep 6 deer alive from a plague for the next portal to appear. Insung reflects that there were a few of them in this small space, and deer are the commanders among the 10 symbols of longevity. He notices the hexagon on the floor and says the next one will appear after 6 days. But for some reason, this deer was hitting him. He pets the animal, saying it isn't good and should stop now. But he gets kicked in the groin. Insung twists back and forth in pain, thinking he had lost all dignity, and it was infuriating. He gets back up, asking why they couldn't get along and act like friends. The deer turn and run away from him. Insung sighs, saying there must be a reason for this, and the chat asks if they can smell the chimera on him. The protagonist gets embarrassed, asking how he could take a bath in front of everyone, but the chat tells him to pause the stream. Insung wonders if he really could do that, since he hadn't done it once since arriving here. The stream is paused, and little Gui splashes water for the protagonist to bathe. He says it was a lot of fun, and that he was right to choose the water attribute. He turns the stream back on, saying he's ready, and the chat points out that his bald head is shining. Insung calls the deer over to him. The animals catch his scent and approach him without complaint. Insung strokes their heads, and the chat notes that their earlier behavior was due to the bad smell. The protagonist notices that they seem pitiful for some reason. Then he notices a strange smell and wonders if it was gone because he bathed. He runs his hand over the deer's fur and notices a disgusting red blister. He realizes all the deer had the same thing. This must be the plague mentioned earlier, and they wanted him to keep the deer alive by curing the disease. He notices the chat saying it was hard to survive 4 days, but his mission lasted 6, and that explained the 6 deer this time, plus the hexagon. Insung says he can tell the difficulty has increased since it went up from 4 to 6 days. He decides to check the shop first and only sees 2 things: plague cure and herbivore food. Insung analyzes the options and buys 1 plague cure. He pours it onto the deer's skin and the wound heals, making the young man exclaim how fantastic it was. But the plague cure bottle is already empty. Insung says he used it all to cure just 1 deer and thinks this will cost him all his balloons. If 1 treatment cost 50 and he had to do it for each of them, it would be a waste. And the chat says that's capitalism. The protagonist says he will first grow his viewership by raising his count. That's it. He finds a recommendation ticket costing 100 balloons, which doubles recommendations for 10 minutes. He says he got 947 recommendations and 1,000 were needed to raise his channel's level. This increase in score will bring him more fans, so he begs his fans for recommendations. The young man says that when he was poisoned in his world, a group of girls visited him, talking about a blind date and how it went. He acts out a girl saying that a medical student showed up in a Ford X, But it didn't happen on the same day, and In-sung questions it. He gets surprised, and the chat says he'll regret it if he stops there. Socrates donates 50 balloons, and everyone jokes that he had said before he wasn't interested in women, but was hiding it. Other people in his chat recommend him twice, and the number passes 1,000. Raising his streamer rank to Advanced 2. In-sung says he succeeded in his plan, and the system announces he can expand his viewer limit. 25 more people can now join the stream, and In-sung celebrates loudly. He says more fans are joining the show and notices the people entering the channel. In-sung introduces himself, saying he was in their service, while the chat comments that he was the one who had won 5 times in a row. The protagonist explains that he's currently in room 8 and must save 6 or more deer to clear the dungeon. He says he'll show them once he completes his plan. Pulling out the amethyst and the herb of immortality, while the chat asks how he has those. In-sung approaches the deer and places the amethyst on one of their heads. Then he puts the herb of immortality on that same deer's back, and the chat asks what he's doing. The herb begins to shine and the deer heals, while the chat notes that its suffering has disappeared. In-sung shouts that this was his true version. He notices that the deer looks angry and might lose its life. With the dawn of the second day, the protagonist wakes up hugging 2 deer. He says it was refreshing to live like this, shouting that he will start roll call and everyone should line up. In-sung begins counting, reaching a total of 12 deer out of 14. Looking into the corner of the room, he sees the deer lying lifeless on the ground. He comments that they had already lost their lives and he hoped it wouldn't happen so quickly, but he will start treating the deer right away. First, he'll use the cure on those with small blisters, because the others can be healed with the herb of immortality. It was the 3rd day there, and the protagonist raises a finger, announcing roll call. In-sung thinks another deer has died, but he notices that one didn't have blisters, and there were other deer lifeless now. In-sung says they lost their lives without having any blisters, wondering if someone came and killed them while he was sleeping. On the 4th day, the protagonist is wide awake without sleeping. The other deer stretch and play on the floor, but In-sung points his spear at their heads, telling them they must not leave his sight, nearly collapsing from exhaustion. On the 5th day, the protagonist's eyes turn bloodshot red. The deer moves and In-sung asks if it's hungry. They should eat this, he says, tossing out herbivore feed. The protagonist remarks that the last day is coming soon and none of them had died since then. He says he might lose either his life or his sleep and would rather sleep. Then he collapses as the chat laughs about his vanishing pupils and says not to wake him. A notification appears saying Hubbard has entered room 8. The protagonist suddenly wakes up and the chat tells him to keep an eye on the general. In his room, Hubbard says this semester seems to be about deer. In-sung comments that he came earlier than expected. Second place remarks that his student is very diligent, then congratulates him for advancing. In-sung thinks he managed to escape even faster without having the great spectre's instinct and wonders how the others were doing. Then he asks how Hubbard cleared room 7 so quickly. Hubbard says it's because he studied his manual thoroughly, and In-sung gets annoyed, noticing something in another direction. The deer collapses beside another. The young man asks how that happened. A goat disguised as a deer makes In-sung realize it was making a strange sound. That animal touches the side of the deer, causing it to spit blood and fall to the ground. In-sung demands to know what the hell this is, as all those deer died from a single attack. Grabbing the goat, he orders it to reveal what it really is. He notices the creature's true form and had no idea there was anything other than deer here. He should have noticed earlier, and he cannot spare it, since he still has 7 remaining after it killed the others. In-sung strikes the creature's back. The animal staggers from side to side, bleeding. It collapses onto the teleport hexagon leading to the next stage. In-sung apologizes for it, while the chat tells him not to forget this. But he wonders if it was really okay to leave it like that, since it was strange for it to die on top of the hexagon. In-sung approaches and says it would be better and move it elsewhere, until he realizes something is holding him back, because the animal was not moving. He complains that the damn thing was stuck and refused to move. In-sung wonders about this, and the chat jokes that it must be the threatening mountain goat. The protagonist questions if it was really threatening. His chat says that being the symbol of the devil, the goat was Satan, and he recalls hearing about that 666 circle. In-sung tells them to explain it in a way he can understand. The chat says those are just superstitions and useless talk. Since it doesn't matter, he's still first place. In-sung asks if there's anything more. The young man stares at the goat and notices that normally they have 4 teats, not 6 like this one. At the dawn of the 6th day, In-sung shouts that it doesn't matter because he managed to save 7 deer, so they should keep their word and open the hexagon. However, the ground splits open and the goat gushes blood. In-sung approaches nervously as the deer run away from the spot. The system notifies him that the hexagon of the primitive devil has been activated. The deer scream in terror and a dungeon operator joins the channel. The chat asks if they had ever seen this outsider character, and the operator says he was in charge of this dungeon. In-sung thinks about the operator, assuming each channel must have one. He asks the operator if it's alright since he needs confirmation that you should kill this crazy goat. The operator says it seems they've encountered a problem, and In-sung repeats his concern. The man replies that it will take some time to interpret what happened, since it was unexpected. In-sung says if that's all, then he's in trouble. The operator tells him to wait a bit, and In-sung wonders if he's really going to lose at this point. In the chat, the operator says that after investigating, he confirmed this abnormal goat was placed only in that room. In-sung gets irritated reading this, asking if he was the only one facing this kind of danger. But his live stream chat trembles and disappears from in front of him. A black smoke rises from the hexagon, filling the room. The deer run the other way in fear, while a figure emerges from the goat's body, making a strange sound. In-sung shouts in shock. The goat transforms into a demon. The young man steps back, asking who it is, but the demon speaks in a language he cannot understand. In-sung can't move as the demon begins to fade. The protagonist wonders what's happening, and the creature is sucked into the hexagon. It activates right after, and the portal leads to room 9. The young man drops to the ground, and the deer gather around him, trying to comfort him. In the castle of hell, the operator says the ceremony is complete and apologizes. The king of hell says he couldn't prevent it, and finding who was behind this was more important. Baphomet, a demon, had been resurrected, and he calls for Gangram.